Hi Sean, how are you doing in Australia today?
Hi, Rashmi. I'm doing very well, thank you. Had a nice day today.
hmm And what fascinated me to approach you is the term trauma-informed coach. So, as our first question, could you tell a little about yourself and the work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when it comes to trauma, there are many different types of trauma. When people think about trauma, the first thing they think about is, some really heavy things that have happened, like a car crash, domestic violence, some kind of assault, or something really heavy that they can relate to, that they can see. But what emotional trauma is, and this is what I specialize in more so, is the underlying trauma, all the psychological things that have happened through childhood, all the emotional neglect,
hmm
things like that. That's also quite traumatic. And what a lot of people don't understand is that trauma, one instance of trauma can be highly traumatic on the body, on a somatic level in the nervous system. And that
hmm
can be quite, we can see that. We can go, that person went through a lot. We can really see that. But what we don't see is someone can have repeated small traumatic events. So every
hmm
day as a child, they can be told a certain story by their caregivers or by someone at school. They can have a traumatic experience, these little things, and they all add up and they have a very
Oh,
similar response
right.
in the body. So that doesn't often get very addressed. There's a lot of talk therapy around it, there's a lot of psychology around it, but there's not really a trauma informed approach.
hmm
So, what trauma informed is, it's a mixture of understanding of polyvagal theory, which is an understanding of the nervous system and the body. It, they call it the science of safety.
hmm
So building safety and resilience in your body and having an understanding of what's going on in your body.
hmm
The other thing is, part of trauma informed coaching is understanding attachment theory as well. That's a very big part of it. So that's understanding the bond or the attachment that you have developed as a child,
hmm
from your primary caregiver. So there's that as well. Then there's the neuroscience side, which combines that.
hmm
And then there's polarity as well. So polarity, which is the understanding of masculine and feminine energy, and bringing both of those together to create together.
Interesting. So, well, when it comes to various kinds of trauma, so it could be even something related to past lives or something that happened in the lineage, in the family line, if that's
Mhm.
passed down to a child. Even those probably sometimes bother a human being, isn't it? Or the soul.
Yeah, there is. I think they call that generational trauma.
Right.
So, are we talking about in your lineage or in your own personal past life?
It could be both because
Hmm.
it's sometimes we just because I when you said about neuroscience, so the highly sensitive men, I see their body sometimes shivers, and we really don't know what they are going through. And there's a problem that men don't express. So even
Yeah,
that is a part of what work you do. Uh,
yeah, yeah, absolutely. It takes a lot. It takes a lot. So
because your
what
niche
I
is
what I
pretty
have,
different, is what I got. I so far the interviews that I've taken, yeah.
yeah. So what I my understanding of a highly sensitive person is that their nervous system or their nerves in their body are a lot closer to the surface of the skin. So they their nervous system is overwhelmed constantly. So
Mhm.
then when they're asked a question, they retreat because it's too much. It's overwhelming for them. that makes sense.
Right. Pretty interesting. I didn't know this, like such a thing would make so much of difference in a man's life
Yeah,
or
well, yeah,
exactly.
well, each person is very different from their experience, but
Right.
generally there is, everyone's experience is different, but we all share the same stories or the same feelings. So
Absolutely.
that's what I'm finding as well. It's just about diving into those stories so we can find out what the feeling is and then accepting that feeling. Once we become fully accepted or accepting of how we feel and where we're at, that can be released and then we can move
Hmm.
on. It's often that men are told that they're not allowed to go into their feelings. And if they go into their feelings, that's a bad thing. They're not a man if they do that. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. I think most men hear
yeah.
that a lot. So, yeah, I think we as women also need to support men to start speaking up. All right. Our second question for today. What are the current difficulties you see in collective men worldwide in their daily routine and their relationships overall?
So 3 years ago, things were a little bit different, but
Hmm.
I think I'd like to speak to how things are now.
Okay.
um, what's happened after or since COVID has really shaken men
Hmm.
up as well, in that they don't really know what to do with themselves. They used to go to work, they used to make a living,
Mm.
and then what happened with COVID completely drained them of their energy. And now it's time to go back to work. And they're like, I don't want to do that. Like, why am I doing this? There's a huge lack of purpose with men.
Mm.
I think that's the big one is there's a huge lack of purpose, but there's plenty of distraction and stimulation going on so that
Absolutely.
they can't focus on that. So, and not only that, so I think it's lack of purpose, distraction, and they weren't given the tools on how to attune to themselves and also their
Hmm.
partners in relationships as well. They were often told, that they have a story that women are this, and that, and you're a man, so you should be this, and that. And there's a separation rather than coming together. So I find it's a combination of just what they've been taught and what they have access to now. That's a bit
Hmm.
of the issue. So with their work, now that's why it's such an entrepreneurial age in the past couple of years in particular, where people don't want
Yeah.
to work anymore. They just want to enjoy life. And COVID destroyed people quite literally. And now people are like, why am I destroying myself further? So they have these thoughts that come up, but they don't know how to take action on it because they haven't been given the tools.
And I
But
think everything in men just came up, right? The emotional side. When everybody was
yeah,
just put in a house, they're like, where do I let go of things now?
yeah, there's been a huge shift in men that I've seen lately. There are, I know people that I used to see them and they'll be very stern, very like standoffish.
Hmm.
And now I see them and I speak to them and they're posting things on their socials like how they sat in their car and they cried, and they're posting
Oh,
this on their socials, and
oh
that and
God.
they're
Okay.
speaking up, they're speaking to how it's okay to cry. And I'm like, yes, awesome, let's see more of that. That's what we need to be taught. But I think there's a difference between being emotional
Hmm.
and men offloading their emotions onto the feminine
Lots of
to the
difference.
point where to the point where she's now overwhelmed and has to carry his burden. So I think that's where the problem is the men are like, okay, you want emotion? I'll give you emotion. They let everything out, but they don't hold that strength for themselves and that vulnerability for themselves. So it takes a lot of work to let your emotion out, but to hold yourself strong still.
Right.
And yeah, but we'll get to, I think, that's later down the track, but I think we'll
Yeah.
cover that as well.
Trust me, just the start of this conversation is giving me so much insight from your side, like what
Sorry,
really
you've cut out.
happened to. So,
I can hear you now.
audible? Yeah. So the little points that you shared, it's already giving me a lot of insight, and I'm sure it's going to help men who are finding it difficult to, express themselves.
Yeah.
Hmm. So, yeah, now let's go for our third question. Why is it so tough for men to talk about their emotional issues and intense trauma that they go through?
I think it's very similar to the answer before, is that they
Mm-hmm.
haven't been given the tools and they haven't been given the direction around it.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, what society is asking of men now is the equivalent of asking a first-year med student on his first day to perform open heart surgery. He's just not going to know how to do it. So he
Mm.
wants to. He wants to be he wants to be a surgeon.
Right.
He wants to do, he wants to help people. He doesn't know how. He hasn't been given the tools. He hasn't integrated that in himself in order to be able to do that. And it's the same with men. They just haven't been shown how to do it and how to do it well as
Right.
well.
Yeah,
There's plenty of tools. There's plenty of men's groups and men's support groups out there that show you how to be a man, but there's not many trauma-informed ones.
absolutely. That's what
Mm.
got me connected with you. So, how did your journey, so how did all this life journey unfold for you where you felt, yes, I have to be a trauma-informed coach?
Yeah. So my journey has been quite short. My journey is only 3 years long at the moment. There was
Mm-hmm.
a lot of work that I was doing before that. There was a lot of like mindset stuff that I was looking into before that. So technically 5 years where I started like going a bit more deeper inside. But it was really 3 years ago where I went through a traumatic event where I lost my community. I was brought up
Oh.
in a very strict fundamentalist religion that was very driven around shame. And
Mm-hmm.
as a child, I learned coping mechanisms that weren't healthy. So I would turn to things like self-soothing, pornography. I would turn to things to soothe myself because of the trauma that I was experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
So that all came to the surface. My trauma, everything kind of came to the surface. And as a result, I lost a lot of my community, or all of my community. And then COVID hit. So it
Oh,
was just, I
okay.
just felt very alone in it.
Too much at
So
once.
yeah, a lot happened at once. Yeah. But I started listening to people like Tony Robbins
Mm-hmm.
and Maston Kipp. Maston Kipp, he trained under Tony Robbins. So he has a lot of insight, but Maston's approach was more, when I heard him speak, it made sense. When he
Mm-hmm.
started talking about what's going on in the body, all these reactions that you're having, all these responses that you're having, all trauma responses, I was like, it blew my mind. So I started listening to him more. And then eventually I did my training under him as well. And I
Oh,
thought to myself, more people need to know this. More people need to
absolutely.
know this stuff. There are people that are walking around um, responding and reacting and having all these trauma responses because their nervous system is not healed. So a
Mhm.
healed nervous system, you can cope a lot better in the real world. So a
Yeah.
lot of people, they'll come home from work and they'll be reactive and responding to the bad day that they had. And then with a healed nervous system, you can deal with that on your own without it letting affect you for the rest of the day, if that makes sense.
Right.
Um,
And could you tell a bit more about how that religious programming did not let you live your best life? Like, because I think this is coming up pretty much in all cultures, be it
yeah,
India, be it Australia, Canada. I think somewhere this idea of how religious programming is keeping us so low from our potential. Could you tell a little about that, please? Because yeah,
yeah.
a lot of men would
Well,
need that help.
from my experience, the people that were in my circle and the elders in that area or that vicinity that I was in, they didn't even know what they were doing. They were
Yeah.
also brought up into it. So there's this level of cognitive dissonance where they don't even realize what they're doing. They just know that if someone does something wrong, that they need to be punished for it. And then, so as a child, when you're naturally starting to explore your body, um, and then you learn that God is watching you, and God does not like that, and God is going to, you're not going to get into heaven, you're going to go to hell, or He's going to, God's going to destroy you at doomsday because you're such a bad person. This really deeply affects a child because these are all natural things that are coming up and they're being shamed for it. And I think
Mm.
shame is one of the biggest weapons in religion in general, and
Right.
just this lack of acceptance. So I think that's one of the big collective things that is happening with religion, is that a lot of it just runs off fear and shame, basically.
Totally. Even I had to do so much work to deprogram myself from that religious um,
Yeah,
perception about myself, and now I'm like, once I got that tool, I'm like, okay, I'm ready to let go of all that religious programming. And
yeah,
it's just so light. It's so much more lighter after that. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. It does a lot of damage, and people don't realize it until they're free from it. And I have I have COVID to thank for that too, because the meetings, we weren't expected to show up to church as much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so there was like we were starting to get less and less brainwashed, and then people, um, a friend of mine, a friend of mine was researching it, like they went down the Reddit rabbit hole and started researching, and they started to see that people were leaving these churches because they weren't going
Oh,
there as much because
okay.
the brainwashing was slowing down, it was stopping. And
Mm.
the numbers were starting to drop and drop and drop. So it's very interesting seeing, um, when it's very active and in your face, you're going to believe it. But then when it
Mm.
starts to drop off a bit, then you start to trust your own body and you start to trust your own inner intelligence. And for me, that's when I kind of woke up one day and I said, this doesn't make sense. Why, why would a God punish people based on a trauma response? If God is love and all knowing, wouldn't he understand what trauma is? So
Makes sense.
that was that was
Mm.
one of the big things for me. And then things just started to just not add up. And then I just was pulling away further and further and further away from it, to eventually I just felt a lot more free from it and starting to
Mm.
live my own life. Yeah.
Excellent. Because, yeah, I've been on that similar journey, and sometimes it's the way we do festivals in India. It's like we spend way too much money in the name of pleasing God, and then it just doesn't make sense to me, at least, because I think if we could have collectively done that, we could have built somebody else a house who needs it. So,
Mm,
yeah, we need a lot of change here when it comes to festivals.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. With
All right.
religion, there's a lot of agenda around it.
Yeah, it is because I have been observing things a lot, and it's mostly to do with praising the male energy, the masculine energy, but a little less compare of the feminine part. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm emphasizing more of that, at least from my side
Hmm.
in this
Yeah. Well, it's
country.
it's a man-made construct, not a woman-made construct.
Yeah.
So it makes sense.
And there's so much, like you said, you are very right on that point. It's more of fear-based programming. So
Mm.
yeah. Okay, so our next question. Right.